Hello and welcome to my bower. This is the first video I'm filming here at the new place in my new chair. Just got it set up. We're outdoors, so there's going to be outdoors noises. Don't mind the crows cawing away in the trees. We are at the new house. Hooray! So, this is a perfect place for filming, and I just finished a book, so we're going to do a book review of it. I didn't even write any notes. We're just going to go from memory. Just finished listening to it today while I was driving to the new house, so. That book is The Woman in the Library. Allow me to read you the blurb on Goodreads. An ornate reading room in the Boston Public Library is quiet until the tranquility is shattered by a woman's terrified scream. Security guards take charge immediately, instructing everyone inside to stay put until the threat is identified and contained. While they wait for the all-clear, four strangers who'd happened to sit at the same table pass the time in conversation, and friendships are struck. Each has his or her own reason for being in the reading room that morning. It just happens that one is a murderer. Now that's a fairly straightforward blurb, and that does give you an idea of what part of the story is about, but the reason I actually liked this book is because there is a separate framing device. And it wasn't mentioned in the blurb, so it was just like a happy accident that I found it. There is the framing device of a book within a book. So the murder mystery that we are reading is actually a book being written by an unseen author, and each chapter is getting to her critique partner, her alpha reader, heavy quotations. We'll get into that a little more later, but while you never hear anything from this author, you do get notes every chapter from the alpha reader. And that honestly was the most interesting part of the story. The murder mystery itself is fairly average. Of course I guessed who the murderer was going to be, because the murder mystery is not trying to be exceptional. There's even indication that what we're reading is an earlier draft of this mystery. I really like the framing device as an author myself. It echoes very slightly in my bower, and I don't know whether it bothers me, like how much it bothers me, but I notice it. Anyway, the framing device was my favorite part. The murder mystery, fairly simple. It was really interesting though with the framing device to notice a lot of things pointed out that I didn't even notice. For example, the quote-unquote alpha reader points out that the quote-unquote author of this story has not described any of the characters really, so we don't know what race they are, really what they look like at all, aside from like one thing each. And I didn't even really realize that until it was pointed out to me. Quite frankly, I'm mostly going to be talking about the framing device in this one because, like I said, the murder mystery was painfully average, but I think it was meant to be. Although part of me does wonder if the actual author of The Woman in the Library wrote an incredibly average murder mystery, realized that, and added the framing device later to make it more interesting. The thing is, people are going to love or hate the framing device. Looking at the reviews, it seems like folks who gave it lower stars kind of hated the framing device. There was one person who hated the murder mystery and liked the framing device, but for the most part, it seems to be everybody's least favorite part. And it was my favorite part. This book is very meta, and I like that about it. Now, the main character of the story within a story is also an author and probably a self-insert for the author that we never get to see who's writing the story within a story, or at least the alpha reader assumes that she is, but we don't even know if that's a thing. The only thing we know is that the author writing the story within a story had a similar experience where she met three other people in a library. I've heard fellow authors say that they absolutely hate when books star authors, and this book kind of does it twice. It kind of doubles down on that. But I have never had a problem with books that star author characters. I actually really like it. The author of the actual book, The Woman in the Library, does bring out this conversation between like a character who is clearly a pantser, that being the writer character in the story, and a character who's clearly a plotter, one of her friends in the story. And I really liked that because it was never hostile. You see it so often in the writing community where people always treat their method as like the best method, but these these were two authors who were just really interested in learning about each other's method, both intrigued and impressed by the way that the other one writes without either of them pressuring the other one into trying it their way. And I really, really liked that. I liked that just feeling of camaraderie and collaboration versus like hostility and my way is best. Now, maybe in the regular author world, nobody thinks that their method is best, and the only reason that I have experienced that is because I hang around on AuthorTube, where seemingly everybody thinks that their method is best. But it was really interesting to look at it through the lens of just two people with very different writing processes meeting, talking about their process, and like learning about each other's process without any like smugness or hostility. So let's talk about this alpha reader in the framing device, because this is the most interesting part of the book to me. Fans of Misery might like this book, and it was also incredibly relatable because I think many of us, especially those of us who are women, have encountered a person like this, usually on the internet. This person starts out definitely like throwing up a few red flags if you're familiar with the type of person you're dealing with, but initially seems fairly harmless, just trying to help out this author character and be like, hey, let me give you some notes about America because you're writing about Boston, but you live in Australia. So this alpha reader is telling her about the places where she is setting her story. Seems useful, right? But you never hear back from the author about the alpha reader's notes, which immediately gave me the hint that these were potentially unsolicited notes that she perhaps did not actually want to receive. And also, as the story went on, the alpha reader definitely began to project a lot more. He seemed to believe that the author had written him a character within the story and would get very upset if he felt this character was being treated badly. He also did something that aside from simping incredibly hard for the author, which again, you see so often when somebody is more successful, a less successful sort of potentially hack who thinks that they're a genius but isn't, tries to weasel their way into becoming like the confidant, the spiritual guide, the helper of the more successful author. It hasn't happened to me because I'm not very successful, but I have seen it happen to other people. And get this more successful author to like praise them, to give them a leg up, to put in a word with their publishers. And that is what this guy is trying to do. He also has this notion that he is going to somehow guide this author in her writing process. Now, I have run into readers like this. Readers who assume that they know best what your book needs just because it's their taste. There are definitely some things that he says that I didn't even necessarily disagree with. But he began insisting that the author needed to make changes to the story, changes that would have made it much less her story, and I found that very relatable. He kept insisting that she show a lot of gore, and she did not want to show a lot of gore, very clearly. He says, I know it's not your style to show gore, but I think you should, and he started sending her gory images of murder scenes that he snuck into. Also, this guy insisted that she put descriptions of the characters, which, as I mentioned until he pointed it out, I hadn't even noticed we didn't have. So it was clearly working for her to not have descriptions of the characters, and most importantly, it was a choice that the author had specifically made, possibly for good reasons, and it was not a book-breaking choice. Sometimes you just get a critique person who latches on to some choice that you have clearly made as an author and hates it and gets to the point, as this guy did, where they tell you that you are ruining your book, you are terrible, you're making the worst possible choice, you must make this change or your book will never be good. And I just felt that in my soul, this interactions that she was having with this person who was getting increasingly angry at her refusal to cater to his whims and his taste. Now, that is not to say that you should never listen to critique partners or beta readers or whatever. There's just a very specific type that I think a lot of us have encountered, and this guy was that, who thinks that you're more friends than you are and thinks that they have some sort of mentor-like relationship with you, that they can tell you what to change about your book and you must do it because you are somehow the student. I've encountered that person. So yeah, this is a very long, rambly way to say that I really love the framing device. The story within the story was okay. The characters were pretty bland. Lack of character descriptions aside, none of them were very memorable at all. They're just there to do a job. They're just there to get the murder mystery story going. There is a lot of meandering. I feel like, once again, this book could have been a little bit shorter. There are definitely some scenes where it's just like characters interacting, which I like. And I didn't hate those moments, but after they were over, I could find myself going, why did that scene happen? Why did we watch them eat dinner or hang out or chat? I personally like that kind of thing. I like characters to interact, and we don't always necessarily have to be getting some huge new plot point or revelation. But on the other hand, I do understand how that could be boring for some readers. So now I'm going to go into spoilers. Again, referring to the framing device, the thing that I was most excited about. And this is kind of end of book spoilers, so skip ahead to whatever timestamp I put on the screen. But obviously the fan, the alpha reader, gets more and more embroiled in his toxic parasocial relationship with the author. And eventually, the author is obliged to get law enforcement on his ass because he sneaks into Australia. This is also happening during the pandemic. And he sneaks into Australia to, like, try to meet up with her because, like, clearly the only reason they aren't meeting up is because of the pandemic and not because he's a total creep who just gets creepier and creepier as the book goes on. I was waiting to find out that he was, like, actually a murderer in real life, and I don't think we found that out, but he definitely goes to a lot of crime scenes and photographs a lot of bodies. I don't think it was ever answered. Unless I missed it, I do not know how he was getting her pages, how he was getting the chapters that she was writing so he could send her notes on them. That's the confusing part. Was he just reading her finished book and thinking that, and just imagining that they were, like, collaborating? After he'd read a chapter, he would send her an email. Also, why didn't she block his email? Like, there's questions. Like, why did she keep receiving correspondence from him? Because clearly she did, because she was able to inform law enforcement about him. So she's still receiving his correspondence in some way. And somehow he's receiving her pages. I don't know if maybe it was a critique group that she didn't know he was in or something. Like, how was he doing it? Never explained. That was the biggest plot hole for me. This ending is fairly open-ended. Not everything is wrapped up, and it even kind of, like, throws in one last, like, mini mystery at the last second, which I didn't love. Like, another little kick, like, oh ho ho, more could be happening. And I was just like, why? But the biggest thread that I care about not being tied up is how was he getting her manuscript? Alright, that's it for spoilers, and that's it for this review. I'm inside my egg chair. I hope that this was at least somewhat coherent. I recommend this book. I had a good time with it. It was flawed, but definitely interesting and kept me coming back. It did take me a while to read, but that wasn't the book's fault. That was more just because I was so busy with the new house and everything. But have you read The Woman in the Library? What did you think about it? Did you like the framing device? Are you an author who hates when books are written from the point of view of authors, or do you enjoy it like I do? Comment below and let me know. Also, don't forget that you can support me on my Patreon and help me self-publish my own books. The links to my own books are in the doobly-doo. Please do not try to form a parasocial relationship with me and hunt me down. Do not do it. Resist the urge. But you can follow me on my social media, also linked in the doobly-doo, if you want to. That is the safe way to interact with me. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see all of you again next time with whatever it is I happen to be doing next time. Bye!
Oh, Tia! Did you hear the news? Tell her. Oh, tell her, Big Daddy.
Amanda, Unicorn Jenny, Celia, Neon, Taya, Alyssa, Rita, Deborah, My 96, Afra, Melissa, Swamp Goblin Waifu, Sophia, Merween, Kit, Light Julie, Belle, Patrick, Anne Sophie, Callison, Ray, Shelby, Zaire, Jesper, Rennie, Scribbling Cat, Savvy, Jenny, Amanda, Lisa, Sarah, Ashley, and Hidden Glade. Thanks again for all your help. All your help is really big news. I am the writer of fictions. I am the heart that you call home. And I've written pages upon pages, trying to rid you from my